G'day, eh? My name's RJ. This is Killer Canuck, and together, we're looking through Canada's horror history. Cultural identity isn't the only thing that defines a nation's monsters, but it certainly is a heavy influence, and you can learn a lot about a country by examining its fears through its horror films. Different countries fear different things, physical and existential, and that reflects in films from all over the world.
There's a reason why we don't export many Independence Days or We Need to Talk About Kevins. Fears surrounding immigration or mass shootings are just not typical of the cultural zeitgeist in Canada. So, what do Canadians fear? Caught in the void between America and England, our cultural identity has always been a bit muddy, borrowing heavily from both countries, as well as from the people who were already living here before the door was kicked in. Canada is a mishmash of different cultures. But a few things do ring constant throughout our relatively short filmography. Harking all the way back to John Grierson's obsession with documentaries, Canadian films are typically more representative of the day-to-day life of their characters. There is rarely some catastrophic event that beckons the all-American hero to suit up and save the entire planet. We instead favor following the underdogs, the small fries, and the everymans. It should also come as no surprise that one of our most defining factors, especially in our horror films, is our environment. Canada is an utterly massive nation full of extreme environments. If not respected, it can turn on you very quickly, especially in our unpredictable winters. Because of this unwritten agreement with the land, Canada has produced no shortage of nature's revenge and eco-horrors. Films like Black Mountainside, The Thaw, and Backcountry. Identity, or lack of, is often a theme all its own in Canadian film. In Ginger Snaps, John Fawcett uses lycanthropy as an allegory for puberty. Catherine Isabelle is bitten by a werewolf during her first period, and her personality changes rapidly, much to the dismay of her sister. Tucker and Dale vs. Evil uses a case of mistaken identity as a jumping-off point to bloody comedic effect, as Alan Tudyk and Tyler Labine struggle to stop all the teenagers who keep accidentally killing themselves on their property. And in Dead Ringers, David Cronenberg explores the ideas of individual identity, as twins Beverly and Elliot, both played by Jeremy Irons, struggle to coexist with, and sometimes as, one another when Bev develops a drug addiction. This question of identity is at the heart of the 2020 film Possessor, and also at the heart of its creator.
Being the child of a celebrity comes with its own share of problems. Following in your famous father's footsteps, not only in craft but down to the genre, makes it very difficult to temper expectations. It would be easy to look at either of Brandon Cronenberg's feature films, Antiviral or Possessor, and simply claim that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, speaking of course of his father, David. But Brandon has the unique opportunity to look at the theme of identity through one further lens.
While on the press tour for his debut feature Antiviral in 2012, Brandon constantly felt like an imposter in his own life. After having to put himself on day in and day out, he eventually felt like a stranger waking up in someone else's body. This idea not only became the basis for his sophomore feature, but someone waking up as someone else became the first scene that he wrote. 8 years in the making, as he began writing it while on that same press tour, Possessor is a hard sci-fi horror film from Canada's Golden Boy's Golden Boy. It follows the day-to-day life of Tazia Voss, played by Andrea Riseborough, who genre fans might recognize as Mandy, from Mandy. Voss is a hitman, for lack of a better word, who uses the body of others as her weapon. This is demonstrated right away. Voss, utilizing the body of a woman named Holly, played by Canadian actor Gabrielle Graham, recalibrates her connection to the host. This spectrum of Holly's emotions is the first imagery we see, and Graham's short, but powerful and memorable performance sets the tone for the rest of the film. She is beckoned by her co-worker, a bit part from Canadian actor Hanneke Talbot, who played Chelsea in the Soska's remake of Rabid, and the two make their way up to a party they are stewarding. Holly makes her way towards a man at the far end of the room and stabs him 21 times in the neck and chest. Standing over the Swiss cheese that was formerly a person, Holly raises her provided pistol to her mouth before calling out,
"Pull me out."
But try as she might, Voss can't bring herself to pull the trigger. Eyeing the police rapidly approaching her, she instead raises her gun on them, committing suicide by cop. Voss clambers her way out of the machine she was using to occupy Holly's body from the safety of her office building. Her neural connection to the host now severed, Voss has to reorient herself to her own body. She's interviewed by her boss, Girder, played by Jennifer Jason Leigh, in another genre role following her turn in Annihilation in 2018. This is Jason Leigh's first time working with a Cronenberg in 21 years, having starred in Existence for David in 1999. Our theme of lack of identity is on display, as Girder shows Voss a box of trinkets. She looks through, pointing out which things belong to her and which things don't, so she can assure Girder that she's still all there, after, inhabiting another human brain for an extended period. She passes the test by expanding on the butterfly she pinned into a box when she was younger.
I still feel guilty about it.
Girder wants to assure Voss stays in peak mental health, because she wants Voss to replace her when she retires. She mentions an upcoming job, a big one that will put their company on the map, but Voss declines in order to spend time with her estranged husband and her son, much to Girder's disdain. Voss stands outside her house and practices how to be herself.
Hi, darling. Hi, darling.
She has dinner with her son, Ira, and husband, Mike, played by another famous Canadian son, Rossif Sutherland.
Many of the shots in this house are framed intentionally uncomfortably. In fact, when Voss isn't in the machine, the shots are entirely handheld. When Voss is in the machine, however, when she's hunting, playing somebody else, the handheld shots are replaced by smooth Steadicam and shots on sticks.
Brandon Cronenberg has a close friendship and working relationship with cinematographer Karim Hussein. The pair lived down the road from each other for the majority of Possessor's creation. Hussein's prior work includes Jason Eisner's Hobo with a Shotgun, Paul Gross's Hyena Road, and Jay Baruchel's Random Acts of Violence. An incredibly awkward dinner party, a flat joke from her son, and a nightmare robot inspires Voss to return to work and get debriefed on her newest assignment. Brandon Cronenberg obviously has a few things to say about massive corporations, shown both in Antiviral and here, as Girder in plain speech details how Voss is to murder John Parse, the head of data mining corporation Zuthru, and his daughter, Ava. She is to possess Ava's boyfriend, Colin Tate, an outstanding performance by Chris Abbott. Voss observes Tate in his apartment, mimicking the way he says certain phrases. This is the first stable shot we have seen of Voss since she left the machine. Her company abducts Colin and places an implant into his head that will allow Voss to take control. They use this neat little skin-cutting device that was also seen in Antiviral. As Voss climbs back into the machine, Girder reiterates some important points, such as the proper pronunciation of Ava's name, before we are treated to a psychedelic neural transmission.
I'll take a moment here to mention that almost every single effect in Possessor is done practically. With the exception of some wire removal, blade extensions, and some moving artwork, everything was done in camera, including the color tones. The crew took wax casts of Andrea Riseborough and Chris Abbott and exposed them to extreme heat to get the smelting effect, and played the footage in reverse to show the reconstruction.
The next morning, Voss wakes up in Colin's body. The shots are smooth and stable. Voss is back in her element. She takes a moment to examine her equipment before proceeding with Colin's life. She converses casually with Ava, who picks up hints of Voss's presence.
What's with you today?
Though Voss cuts her apple the same way, she counters confidently, assuring her assassination target that she is in fact the man she loves, and not a predatory stranger. While in the apartment, she experiences some artifacting, in the form of styrofoam floating in place. This effect was achieved by blasting sound waves at the styrofoam from underneath. They used the same technique on flowing water at the party scene we opened with. The next day, Voss heads to Colin's day job, a data miner at Zuthru. This might honestly be the most frightening part of this entire movie. Through a pair of VR goggles, Voss sits at a digital desk. On her digital computer, she collects personal information through video feeds from people's personal devices. When she arrived, she was told to collect data on drapes and curtains, so when she starts, she's shown live feeds from people's homes and has to audibly announce all the window dressings that she sees. During this dive into strangers' privacy, she sees a child playing on a tablet, someone making their bed, and even a couple about to get it on, all of them unknowing participants in a data mining live stream.
In 2021, most people are well aware that their personal data is constantly being collected by the little computers we have in our pockets. When Cronenberg was writing Possessor back in the early 2010s, he was heavily influenced by the Snowden leaks, and unfortunately, his prediction is probably not too far off.
Voss leaves her post in distress and heads to the bathroom. She takes a look into the mirror and sees a reflection, but also catches a glimpse of Colin watching her playing him. This effect was achieved using 2 adjacent rooms and 2 windows to get multiple reflections. She passes out and is checked in on by Eddie, Colin's friend and co-worker, under the sickness of yellow lighting. Voss heads back to Colin's apartment, where Ava is having some girlfriends over for a few games of scratch and sniff. They discuss the morality of Colin's job,
I feel like a certain type of mind must get off on violating people's lives like that.
and we learn that Colin has been having an affair with Ava's friend Rita, played by Canadian actor Gagné O'Horn, who some will recognize as Tanis from Letterkenny. This get-together scene mirrors the one that Voss had to endure when she visited Michael.
Didn't think they'd stay so long.
The next day, Voss recalibrates before heading to John Parse's cartoonishly oversized mansion for the company party. Parse, played by the legendary Sean Bean, gives a hollow speech before the evening's festivities. Voss, as Colin, is belittled by Ava's father in front of his friends, and takes a walk to chat with Girder. She's instructed to make a drunken scene. That way, when Colin returns later that night for the kill, the people at the party will connect the incorrect dots. Voss, accidentally on purpose, bumps into Ava's father and throws some choice words in his face. But one does not simply step to John Parse, so she's forcibly removed.
You think you can step on me? I'm a giant!
Later that night, a drunken Parse sits with Ava, reflecting on the evening's events. He alienates her and she leaves the room, just as Voss enters brandishing a fire poker. She places her provided pistol on the table, showing Parse her intentions. Parse tries to call Voss's bluff and tells her to go home. For England, James? Parse asks. No, Voss responds. for me, and when Parse makes a reach for the gun, he is bludgeoned mercilessly by the fire poker. The violence is extreme and unflinching, so much so that I actually can't show it uncensored.
I will remind viewers that almost everything in Possessor is done practically, including this uncomfortable animatronic Sean Bean puppet, of which only one was made. The technique used for the teeth in this sequence were built off of what special effects artist Dan Martin learned while on the set of Human Centipede 2. Needless to say, the puppet was properly dilapidated by the time they got the shot.
Ava re-enters the room and sees what she understands to be her boyfriend unrelentingly mutilating her father. She turns for the exit but catches one of Voss's bullets in the shoulder. She follows the trail of blood and gives Ava a swifter end than the one she provided for her father. Voss turns the gun on herself and calls for them to
pull me out.
But once again, she can't bring herself to pull the trigger. And it's in this momentary weakness that Colin fights back from the recesses of his mind. He takes a shard of broken glass from the floor and jams it into the top of his head, damaging the implant and assuming direct control.
Chris Abbott and Andrea Riseborough spoke frequently throughout the filming of Possessor about character. Was it to be Chris observing Andrea and then playing her playing him? The identity dive was deep, and Abbott would often ask Riseborough how Voss would react in certain scenarios. The two managed to get a grasp on when Tate was Tate and when Voss was Tate, at least for the most part.
Sometimes I say to Brandon, are we, who am I again?
With Colin back in the driver's seat and Voss now lost in the recesses of the shared mind, Tate brings them to Rita's apartment. He asks to stay there, afraid to stay at his own apartment. Many of the shots of Colin here mirror the shots of Voss, uncomfortable in her own home. Rita agrees that he can stay for a few days. She's heading to Chicago anyway. She goes to take a shower and Colin sits, dumbfounded, watching television. On screen is an actual experiment by real-life neuroscientist Jose Delgado. Footage of him essentially mind-controlling a bull who had an implant in its brain. As it starts to charge at him, Delgado simply presses a button, and the bull stops in its tracks.
Jose Delgado's neurological experiments are the basis for the science in Possessor. Delgado actually found that depending on where in the brain the implant was, subjects would perform certain actions and then try to retroactively provide justification for themselves. People would walk somewhere in the room and then provide themselves with a fake motivation after the fact. When Colin first enters Rita's apartment, he frantically tries to justify his killings of John and Ava Parse, claiming that he acted in self-defense, when Colin himself actually had nothing to do with it.
Knock knock, it's Eddie. He stun guns Colin and drags the body into the bedroom. He speaks directly to Voss as he attempts to give her control of the body back. He was a plant the entire time, and it was him that suppressed Colin in the first place to get hands on his body. In a mind-bending sequence, Voss struggles to take control of Colin's body back, but Colin is not giving up without a fight. In the real world, Eddie works on the implant in Voss's head, but during the battle of the mind, Colin gets the upper hand, crushing the newly fragile Voss's head and wearing it like he works at a meat processing plant in Texas. Using this shell of Voss, Colin gets direct access to some of her personal memories. He revisits her killing as Holly at the party, her evening with Michael and Ira, as well as their home. Colin snaps back, just in time to lower the pistol that is now under his chin. He discovers the bodies of both Eddie and Rita, casualties of the struggle of the mind. Distraught, Colin raises the pistol back to his temple, but once again, the suicide is avoided, as Voss and Colin's psyches fight one another. Unfazed, Colin makes his way towards Voss's family. We get a shot identical to the earlier one of Voss, as Colin eyes Michael's house. He approaches the front door and Michael allows him in under the false pretense that he knows his wife. Brandishing the provided pistol, Colin holds Michael at gunpoint, comparing his wife to a parasite and screaming at Voss in the back of his mind.
Come out or I'll do it!
Voss makes herself seen to Colin in his head, but explains to him that her identity is so fragmented that she doesn't even know if it was her that loved Michael in the first place. Michael attempts to take advantage of this mental bickering, throwing hands at Colin while he's distracted, but in true Canadian fashion, his heroism is rewarded with a nearby meat cleaver to the hand. Not to be outdone by Voss as Holly, Colin, or more accurately Voss, strikes Michael with the meat cleaver 26 times, leaving him to bleed out on the kitchen floor. Leaning back against the island, Voss raises the pistol to her mouth.
Pull me out.
But once again, she can't bring herself to pull the trigger. She sits there contemplating, but is interrupted suddenly by a knife to the throat. She turns and shoots blindly, sending a bullet through the midriff of her son. She stares at him for a moment before screaming, shown decidedly as Riseborough and not as Abbott, and blowing the child away. As they both bleed out in unison and lock eyes, Gerder's voice emanates from Ira's body.
Pull me out.
Having severed the final thread keeping Voss from succeeding her, Gerder awakens from the machine, followed by Voss. The two share a mournful yet understanding glance before proceeding to the after-action interview. The film ends with Voss recalling her grandfather's pipe and the butterfly she pinned in the box, but this time, she expresses no remorse. By the end of Possessor, our heroine, if you can even still call her that, goes through an identity change. Though she wasn't necessarily on good terms with Michael and Ira to begin with, she likely wasn't about to chop them up and shoot them in the face before she took her latest job. Becoming essentially a machine in her corporate environment, gone are all feelings of grief, and her day-to-day life will go on. She ultimately lives up to the expectations of her mentor, which is perhaps not too far off from what Brandon Cronenberg hopes to achieve in regards to his father.
Though Cronenberg has explicitly expressed that he did not have Canadian identity in mind when he was creating Possessor, it is evident in the work. Tazia Voss spends the entirety of the film not knowing who she truly is. Is she Holly? Is she Colin? By the end, is she even Voss? As a Canadian, as the son of a famous artist, and as a human being, Brandon Cronenberg's own identity is represented in what he has thus far created. And with 2 more films in the works, Infinity Pool and Dragon, I'm just happy to be along for the ride. Until next time, I've been RJ, this has been Killer Canuck, and thanks for watching. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, be sure to drop me a like and hit the subscribe button. If you like the tune playing in the background, be sure to check out Prodouji on SoundCloud and over at noiserecords.com. I'll leave a link in the description below. If you like the sound of my voice, be sure to check out the Alternate Cut podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. What other modern Canadian horror films should I cover? Let me know in the comment section. Until next time.